Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to run you through how to do rear axle bearings on this LT50 project I'm doing. This is the next thing, so I thought I'd run you through it, and yeah, let's take a look.
And if you get value from this video, hit the like button and subscribe to support this channel.
And everything I use in this video will be listed down in the description below, so make sure you check that out. Right then, so to start off with, I've basically propped the quad up on its nose. So what I've basically done is tipped it up and put a block of wood under the front bar just to hold it. So this is mainly so you can see what I'm doing. So these bearings are actually located in this little axle housing, which is mounted on the frame, and it's causing there to be a lot of play in the rear axle. So if I just zoom in there now, I lift the axle up and down, you can see the play there in the bearings. Giving it a lot of movement. So that's what we're going to do, is replace these bearings. Now the other ones in behind the brake drums was a bit more difficult to see, but you can see the movement in this one's plain as day. And if you actually grab the axle and give it a wiggle, you'll feel quite a lot of slop there. So that's why we're going to go ahead and replace these. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove both the hubs. Now you only need to remove the one side, but I'm going to take the two off just to make it a bit lighter. So obviously remove the split pin and then go ahead and remove the center nut. Once we got this off, then you can pull the split pin out the way and we're going to do the nut. There's a split pin. Now I'm going to remove the big nut. Obviously you need to stop the axle from turning, but it's not a difficult thing to undo. So behind there's two washers, so we're going to remove them. The one the cap clips onto and another one. Now what I've noticed is my hub is seized on the drum side, so what I'm going to do is take a blunt chisel, obviously not a sharp one because it'll cut into it, and I'm just going to give it a couple of taps just to separate it from the axle shaft. Now you can use a punch or a drift or whatever you want, but I like a blunt chisel because obviously it's nice and straight and it makes it a bit easier. But yeah, so give it a couple of hits. You can see there now the spacer is nice and loose, and we can see there's a bit of a gap there between the spacer and the actual hub. So we're just going to give that a couple of taps to get that off. And there we go. So once we've done that, then you can just give it a wiggle and pull the hub and wheel off complete and get that out the way. Now the next thing we're going to do is remove the cover over the brake drum. So there's a little spacer, we're going to take away that, and then this cover by here, we're just going to give it a good twist and a pull and it should just pop off. And there it goes. So as you can see, it just clips on, so we're just going to pull that off out the way. Now my drum is seized to the shaft solid, so I couldn't actually get it off. I failed to get it off. So what we're going to do is we're going to strip it down on the other side to get the axle off. So again, we're going to take the other hub off to get that out the way. And even whether you're doing it either side, it's best to get the hubs off so that it just makes it a bit lighter and a bit easier. So once we got the other spacer off, we're going to go ahead now and take the chain off. Now there's obviously a split link you need to locate, and then just basically get pliers and squeeze the outer link off on the side with the gap, and then pull the flat plate off that locates the link. And then once you split that, you can go ahead and slide the link out and separate the chain. There we go. Now I like to just clip it back into the chain so that I know I don't lose anything. So all I ever do is just obviously put it into one side of the chain and clip it back together so that I can make sure I don't lose anything, because there's nothing worse. Now I'm going to go and remove the chain to pull it out the way, but you could just drop it down into the casing on the front sprocket. You don't have to take it off, but I did just to get it out the way. Now the next thing we're going to do is take a punch, and we're going to hit the center of the boss on the actual sprocket mount on the axle. So as you can see there, I'm giving it a couple of taps. Now you can see there, better angle there, you can see it just slides on a set of splines, and we're going to go ahead and tap that off, and you can go and pull that off the axle. Now once we've got that off, we can go ahead and slide the axle out of the bearings. Now it might be a bit tight, but just be careful with it. Now my drum's a little bit tight, so I'm just going to slacken off my cable a little bit on the back brake, just because it's pinching on the drum. and go and remove the axle. Obviously, if you could remove the drum, you could remove it that way. It's the same. So we've got a seal and then a bearing. Now you can see my bearing is partly jamming up and is a bit full of stuff. So I'm going to remove the seal, and then there's the bearing. Now you can see someone has actually removed the actual casings off the bearing, which is obviously what's caused my fault. So I'm going to go ahead now and punch my bearing out. So I'm going to basically put a drift inside, and is what you want to do is locate the gap between the actual center tube and the bearing, and then tap the bearing out. So give it a firm couple of taps. Obviously you want to tap it top and bottom. You don't want to just keep tapping it in one place because it will twist. So I'm just going to tap it a bit at the bottom, a bit at the top, and I'm going to go either side and just keep tapping it, and then until the bearing pops out. So it takes a little while, but you just keep at it and it will come off. Once, you might find it difficult to give it the first couple of taps because there's not much of a gap, but once you get that gap between the center tube and the bearing, and it makes it a lot easier. So yeah, and this is the center tube now I'm talking about. So it's the one that actually the two bearings pinch in the center. And there it is. So we'll go around. I'm going to knock the other side out now, which is obviously the drum side. So I'll do the same on the other side to get the other bearing out. And yeah, we can go ahead and get ready to reinstall. So this is the actual mount all stripped. You can see there's a lot of rust and obviously build up inside where the bearings sit. So we're going to have to give this a good clean to make sure the bearings go in there nice and snug and go all the way. So like I say, just get a bit of emery tape and give these ridges a bit of a clean. Right, so first things first with these bearings now, before we go ahead and install them, now I've noticed with bearings, I've always been taught to pack them well with grease because they never seem to come with enough grease in them. So if you've watched my front wheel bearing video, I tell you to do the same thing. So we're going to do the same again. So what we're going to do, we're going to remove the outer casing, the plastic casing on the bearing. So take a pick, just push it between the rubber casing and the bearing and pop that off, both sides of the bearing. And then we're basically going to take some grease. I got some Pro RG2 Silclean grease, but any sort of lithium based or good quality grease we're going to put in here and just pack it out. Obviously you don't want to put too much, but as long as the casing will go back on nice and snug, then it's fine. But yeah, as you can see there, I thought I'd zoom up so you can have a look. There's actually a section of this bearing's got no grease at all, so they seem to put like 2 blobs in there and that's it. So I always firm believer of giving it a good packing of grease, especially for how much it goes around. So there you go, that's the 2 sides now. So we'll push the casings back on and go ahead, and that's one bearing done, and we'll do the same to the other bearing and get ready to install. And there it is. And that's my bearings done. It takes it takes less than a minute to do, and it makes, in my opinion, makes the bearings last a lot longer. So the first thing I'm going to do is just run a screwdriver inside the housing just to see if I can get rid of any loose bits, well, any hard bits of debris that's or rust that's built up, and then take a bit of sandpaper and give it a good polish. Now it did take me probably a minute to do that, but obviously I've skipped it for this video. And then go ahead then and insert the new bearing. You can go ahead and tap it until it's flush with the housing, but it actually sticks in about, I don't know, 5 or 6 mil, maybe probably the depth of the seal, just over into the housing. So obviously you're going to have to use a drift or some sort of a punch, but sometimes I like to use sockets, but for this instance I'm just going to use a drift to make sure it's home. And there's a recess inside, and you just tap it all the way until it hits the recess, and that's it. And then we're going to go ahead now and insert the seal. So once again, this one's nice and easy though. You just hit him till he's flush with the housing. So I'm just going to give him a tap in a bit of a circular motion and keep tapping him round until he sits flush. And make sure you run your finger around just to make sure he's flush with the housing, and that's it. So we're going to go ahead and do the other side. So again, take a screwdriver. I'm going to go a bit quicker on this just to get it out of the way. So run the screwdriver around, give it a good clean with emery tape once again. And then make sure it's nice and polished and nice and clean. Don't worry about in the center of the tube because it really doesn't matter. It's just where that bearing is going to sit, because you need to make sure that bearing goes all the way home. So there's the next bearing. So just be careful of the shoes now and give it a couple of taps. Again, tap it until it's flush, and then you can go ahead and take your drift or your punch or your socket or whatever you want to use. Don't worry about tapping the center of the bearing, it won't hurt it because it's a ball bearing. Just tap it all the way home. Usually a good indicator that it's home is that the center tube pinches in the middle. Again, put the seal in and tap that home, and away to go. Now, I did take a little bit of grease here and just give the seals a little bit of lube. It's up to yourselves really. I like to put a bit of grease on them just, to lubricate them a little bit, but some people like to put them dry, so it's kind of personal preference with that. So next thing is the axle. Now obviously you can see where the actual bearings sit is quite rusty. So I'm going to take a bit of emery tape and I'm going to polish. I'm also going to polish the splines up where the sprocket sits. And if I could get the brake drum off, I would go ahead and polish them splines too. But this drum is seized solid onto my shaft, and I failed to get it off. So even in a press, I would have loved to have got it off and cleaned it all up, but yeah, my drum failed to come off even in a press after I'd removed the shaft. So yeah, it's staying on there for the purpose of this video. And like I said, if you find your sprocket is seized on, then you can go ahead and remove the drum, then do it that way and remove it from that side. It really doesn't matter. It's kind of up to yourself. But this is the way I've had to do it because obviously my drum is seized. So give it a good clean. Now I'm again big believer of I might have to take this apart again. So some copper slip or any sort of anti-seize. Obviously I'm going to put it where the bearings sit. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it on the spline as well. So plenty where the bearings sit, just to make sure they don't seize to the shaft. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some on the splines where the sprocket's going to sit. Now I will put some on where the hubs go on as well, but I'll do that later. The last thing I want to be doing is getting anti-seize or copper slip everywhere. So yeah, I'll do them a bit later. And then we'll go and reinsert the axle and get him locate the drum, and there she is. Now we can go ahead and get our sprocket and hub. Now I did notice that it's a bit rough around the actual where the seal runs. The seal obviously runs on this boss. Now it's not detrimental to it, but obviously you want to stop the dirt and water getting into the bearings, so every little helps. So I give that a good polish and a good clean with a bit of emery tape. And then we'll push that into place. Now we'll go ahead, we've got two tubes, a longer and a shorter. So I worked out the longer one goes on the sprocket side and the shorter one goes on the brake side. It kind of makes sense really. And then again go ahead and stick some copper slip where the hub goes. And go ahead and reinsert the hub. Now I will, spoiler alert here, I did actually forget to put the cover on the brake drum. So I'm going to put the chain on, then I'm obviously going to take that hub back off to put the drum cover back on. But yeah, so I insert the chain and put it back on. Now with chain links, I'm not telling you to suck eggs, but with these ones in particular, you need to look at the rotation of the wheel, or obviously the axle, and basically the clip wants to be pointing the opposite way. So it wants to be pointing backwards. So when it's on the top, or like this, in this case it's on the back, it wants to be pointing down. So if it's on the top of the chain, it wants to be pointing backwards. So that's with the gap towards the back. And obviously if it's on the back, it wants to be pointing down. So as you can see, the direction I'm pointing there. So I've pulled this hub back off now to insert this cover, like I said earlier. Yeah, I just forgot to clip this on. So it just clips onto the actual housing and just covers the drum. Stops the dirt getting onto it, but obviously in my case it hasn't done a very good job because my drum is seized on solid. So I'm going to go ahead and reinsert this hub. Then we got our two washers and our nuts. Now with these nuts, they're quite simple. You just wind them all the way down until they're home. And then what we do is just give them a good firm nip. You want to make sure that it is tight because it does pull all them spacers and hubs and everything into line. So give it a firm pull. And then once you've done that, then just make sure you line up the split pin hole to the next hole. So if it's just before, if it's got to go a fair bit, then you got to, so be it. But I always like to tighten them up, give them a firm tighten, and then turn them to the next available hole. Never turn them backwards, because the last thing you want to do is loosen them off. And then yeah, once you've done that, and go ahead and put the split pin in. bend him around, and that's pretty much done. The only thing left now is to put the hubcap back on and check to make sure there's no play, and obviously make sure your split pin's locked over. So yeah, and that's it. So we'll just check there's no play and go ahead and put that hubcap on, and there we go. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this helps, and yeah, stay tuned for more videos, and I look forward to the next episode. Have a good day.
And if you get value from this video, hit the like button and subscribe to support this channel.